Hello again, fans and friends, and welcome to another episode of PD's 4R. My name is PDW2KX, and today I want to talk about the blockbuster video game sequel, Death Stranding 2 on the Beach. Originally released on June 26, 2025, Death Stranding 2 is the second ever strand-type game in the history of video games. If you're drinking the Hideo Kojima Kool-Aid, that is. Or, if you're in the opposite camp, Death Stranding 2 is actually the dreaded second entry into the franchise derided as a glorified walking simulator. The truth, as always, lies somewhere in between. Most people you talk to will agree that Death Stranding 2 is a far less polarizing video game than the original Death Stranding. Even the most die-hard Kojima haters seem to be willing to admit that Death Stranding 2 offers a more refined, polished experience compared to the original Death Stranding, while introducing plenty of new and interesting gameplay elements. Thankfully, it also not only keeps the trademark Kojima weirdness that fans of the prolific creator know him by, but it turns it up all the way past 11. Death Stranding 2's story is cinematic, unforgettable, and every once in a while it is also incredibly weird. And that's the most you could ever ask for in a Hideo Kojima game.
Thank you. This is honestly all I ever wanted.
Wow.
In that way, I suppose it has a very strange power over me. So alluring. I want it so bad.
And what do I think? Well, let's get into it. Here's my review for Death Stranding 2. As always, I'll start by covering what I enjoyed the most about this game. Let me address this right off the bat. There are several notable areas where Death Stranding 2 is remarkably improved over Death Stranding 1. I'm not sure if it was done because Kojima heard all the walking simulator smack talk, or simply because all great video game sequels fix and improve upon the weakest aspects of the previous game. Both combat and traversal are remarkably improved in Death Stranding 2. It was so strange to me that the visionary that gave us the Metal Gear Solid franchise couldn't find a way to make stealth and gun combat feel natural in the original Death Stranding. In Death Stranding 2, things are much more similar to the glory days of booting up your PS2 to play Metal Gear Solid 2 and finding yourself totally engrossed with the experience of being an elite super spy. It just occurred to me that some of you watching this weren't even born yet when the PS2 and Metal Gear Solid 2 came out. Man, I'm getting old.
Now I feel old.
How do you do, fellow kids?
What?
With the original Death Stranding, combat always felt unpredictable, uneven, and chaotic. And you constantly entered combat feeling drastically underqualified until the very late game when you unlocked all the best weapons. Call me crazy, but I actually liked how scary BTs were in the original Death Stranding. As I so often like to do, let me express myself in memes. This is how combat felt when you encountered a giant BT in the original Death Stranding.
We're all doomed to die.
Help! Help! Help me! Help!
And this is what combat feels like when you encounter a giant BT in Death Stranding 2.
Get your fat ass back here.
I'm feeling romantical.
This is actually only one example of Death Stranding 2 being the polar opposite of Death Stranding 1, usually in a good way, but sometimes in a bad way too. But make no mistake, combat and stealth are where Death Stranding 2 shines, while they were one of the weakest aspects of the original Death Stranding. The development team took one of their biggest weaknesses and turned it into one of their greatest strengths, and that is simply commendable.
Ah, commendable, Lieutenant.
Huh, neat.
Here's another thing I felt was quite commendable. I'm not sure how well it translates on a technical aspect, but in my time with the game, I noticed that the Death Stranding 2 map felt quite a bit larger than the map of Death Stranding 1, and yet it also felt remarkably easier to traverse. You have so many options and so many ways and so much versatility in how you get from point A to point B. If you don't like taking the scenic route, the game only slightly punishes you from fast traveling everywhere. It barely feels like a punishment at all. But if you do like getting lost in the exploration, it's more fun than ever to lose yourself in the experience of a strand-type game. Again, the team at Kojima Productions listened to fan feedback, and anyone who yelled out "Walking Simulator" now has at least 5 or 6 different options to instantly transport yourself to just about anywhere on Death Stranding 2's large, gorgeous map. And my, oh my, oh my, is this game absolutely gorgeous. I know. Graphics don't make the game. Trust me, I know, and trust me, I agree. I'm very thankful and very happy that we live in an age where a single indie dev with a dream can make a game in their grandmother's basement that has graphics that look like a child's cardboard paper drawing. And if it's got enough heart, and if it's a good enough game, it can still sell over 1 million copies.
Preaching to the choir. But you know what I always say?
Everyone loves an underdog.
That's exactly right.
But we should also appreciate an impressive visual spectacle when we see it. And Death Stranding 2 is a feast for the eyes. Calling this game cinematic is barely scraping the surface. This is an experience. You have to see it for yourself and play it for yourself to really understand what I'm talking about. The game's visuals are, much more often than not, absolutely stunning. And those visuals are used to create moments that routinely take your breath away. And now it's time to talk about what I didn't like in Death Stranding 2. Honestly, I had very few issues with the game. But the ones that I did have, I have to admit that they were definitely significant enough that it brought my review score down. So here it is. I like the story of Death Stranding 2. I promise I do. But man, does this thing bounce around a lot. I know what you're gonna say. PD, this is a Kojima game. It's supposed to be confusing and weird. That's part of the charm. And you're right. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about how the Death Stranding 2 story suffers from jack of all trades, master of none syndrome. Death Stranding 2 features so many in-depth discussions about so many heavy topics that it starts feeling like the entire game is just one long dissertation on everything and anything Hideo Kojima felt was important enough to talk about.
Wow. Interesting.
It says wrap it up. Wrap that shit up, B.
Death Stranding 2 comes dangerously close to crossing the line into preachy territory, maybe even crossing that line a few times. It can feel so self-righteous, so up its own butt with how important it feels it is, that it can really take you out of the experience. In my previous review of True Detective Season 1, one of the main things I focused on in regards to the incredible quality of that show is the fact that it explored so many diverse, very heavy, very philosophical topics without ever making you feel like you were being preached to or lectured at or looked down upon. A lot of Death Stranding 2 doesn't feel like that either, but some of it does.
We're a little more progressive and ahead of the curve here in San Francisco.
There are extended scenes focusing on debates and discussions about philosophy, religion, death, trauma, war crimes, climate change, and what feels like 20 other topics. Death Stranding 2 has a lot to say, maybe too much to say. Normally, I like when games explore multiple different topics and themes, but this is simply too much, and some of it isn't handled with any sort of poise or grace at all.
And now you hate me.
Why you pouring me? I'm right.
I know this is going to sound weird, but my second biggest issue with Death Stranding 2 is an incredibly small issue to most people, so let me explain. I love delivering cargo in this game. I love losing myself on the road, listening to the game's incredible soundtrack. Seriously, the songs in this game are so good that several of them are now a permanent addition to my playlist, and then finally delivering my cargo in pristine S-tier condition. But I kept running into the following scenario. I would be on my way to a delivery, and I would need to do something simple like make a U-turn, and I wouldn't even be going that fast at all, and I would accidentally bump into something small, and it would significantly damage my cargo. This happened to me so often, from the start of my playthrough all the way past the ending and into the end game, that my anger at this broken mechanic kept escalating to a point where this issue ended up honestly infuriating me.
Rotten hell. You can just go to hell. You go to hell and you die.
I am not kidding when I tell you that I had and still have a giant issue with the sensitivity of any and all cargo and the hit detection that turns even the smallest graze across the smallest object into damage so severe and so significant that it routinely downgraded my delivery score from S tier all the way to B or even C tier with just one bump. And as much as I love this game, and I do love this game, and as much as I love Hideo Kojima, and I do love Hideo Kojima, this was my honest reaction every time this nonsense kept happening to me.
I hate so much about the things that you choose to be.
I am driving a giant armored van at 50 miles per hour and I bump into a small shrub. That shrub should have been reduced to a fine powder, and my glorified tank of a van shouldn't even have a scratch on it. But because I bump into a shrub, my cargo takes a tremendous amount of damage. I experience this so often that at one point I honestly wondered if the game was messing with me. I just cannot fathom how some of the terrain obstacles can damage my product so badly. And what's worse, it technically doesn't damage the container. It damages the cargo. So container repair spray does nothing. If you're not going to give us a way to repair the cargo itself, you should have had no such thing as cargo damage versus container damage. Or you should have just created a new item to repair cargo, or just made container repair spray a one-stop shop for repairing damage. What I experienced, what I had to endure to ensure that my cargo arrived in pristine condition, this is simply terrible game design. Plain and simple. Hate me if you must.
Stop judging me.
I always tell the truth.
So say good night to the bad guy.
Speaking of hating me if you must, I know this is going to make me sound like a hipster, but I liked Death Stranding before it was cool. Back when everyone was deriding Death Stranding 1 as a glorified walking simulator, I was the one in my friend group loudly proclaiming the virtues of that beautiful, busted, janky masterpiece. You had to learn to love Death Stranding, and when you learned to love it, it rewarded you with one of the most unique experiences you could ever hope to play. Death Stranding 2 has much more mainstream appeal, but it's in that appeal to the mainstream that I truly feel something special was lost. Think of it like this. I believe that the original Death Stranding is the purest, most undiluted vision of what Hideo Kojima thinks a good game should be. And I still think that. Despite how much I enjoyed my time with Death Stranding 2, even though I still consider Hideo Kojima one of the greatest, most interesting, most unique game developers in the history of video games, I disagree with his decision to alter his vision and change his game to such a degree that both his vision and his game appeals more to the mainstream than it does to the legions of fans that have supported him for decades. There, I told you this was going to make me sound like a hipster.
I get it. I can feel you judging me. That's palpable.
What happened to you, man?
I hate leaving my reviews on a sour note, which is why I always try to wrap things up in a positive way. So let me say this. It's true I enjoyed Death Stranding 1 more, but I still really enjoyed Death Stranding 2. I am still 1000% convinced that Death Stranding, as a franchise, deserves your time, your attention, and your money. Not only am I still drinking the Hideo Kojima Kool-Aid, I'm going back in for seconds and asking if thirds would be possible. A long time ago, at least in gamer years, a long time ago I swore I would play any video game Hideo Kojima ever made. Death Stranding 2 may not be his best game, nor may it represent his perfect vision of what a game should be, but it does only strengthen my belief that anything Hideo Kojima makes is a guaranteed must-play. While Death Stranding 1 still currently remains as the most Hideo Kojima game out of all the games Hideo Kojima has made, Death Stranding 2 is still an amazing experience and will likely go down as one of the best games of the year. I award Death Stranding 2 a final review score of 8.75 out of 10. And that's the video, fans and friends. Thank you for watching, and please remember to like and subscribe if you feel like liking and subscribing. This has been PDs4R, and I have been PDW2KX. See you in the next one, and I hope you take care.